You all know by now I've been going through Dogen's collection of koans, and I just do it in order. I go through until I find one that feels like there's some spark in me, or there's a question in me, there's something that makes me want to unpack it, usually mostly for myself, but with all of you. And there are a lot of surprises along the way. There are koans that I'm not as familiar with, or ones that I haven't heard for a long time. So there's kind of a discovery. But within that process, there are also a few that I love and that I know must be around the corner somewhere. And I think, when will we get to that one? That one is so great. And today we get to one that is a favorite one of mine, one that I hold on to all the time. Here it is. This is case 93. Shenshan was sewing when Dongshan said, "What are you doing?" Shenshan said, "I am sewing." Dongshan asked, "What is sewing?" Shenshan said, "Each stitch follows the other." Dongshan said, "If my companion of 20 years says so, I guess there's a point." Shenshan said, "What would you say?" And Dongshan replied, "Each stitch is like the earth exploding." So it's almost tempting not to say anything because it's so good. It hangs in the air. It's so beautiful, but we'll go through it anyway. It starts with this setup that we see over and over in koans, where usually one monk approaches another monk who is doing something very ordinary, not necessarily something mundane. It might be zazen, but it's something that is very familiar, that everyone does regularly, maybe every day, washing something, making something, doing some part of the practice. And they ask, "What are you doing?" And it's understood, I think, it must be understood in these stories, that this question is an invitation. It's a subtle but clear invitation to a particular kind of conversation. Because if you come to me and you see that I'm polishing my shoes and you say, "What are you doing?" You know that I'm polishing my shoes. So there's a setup. There's something that's coming, right? I went past another koan today. It's very similar, where uh, one monk goes to another who is sitting in zazen and just walks up and pats him on the back and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm doing zazen." But we know that. So here, Shenshan is sewing, possibly a robe. Usually that's what we would sew, but it could be a repair, it could be anything. And Dongshan, who is senior, comes and says, "What are you doing?" Shenshan says, "I'm sewing." And I like this moment because either he's playing along or he hasn't caught on yet. Dongshan says, "What is sewing?" Well, now we know for sure something's going on. What is sewing? To which Shenshan replies, "Each stitch follows the other." And Dongshan is so dismissive. He says, "If my companion of 20 years says so, there must be a point." Right? Like, whatever. I guess if you say that sewing is each stitch following the other, I mean, maybe, but I'm disappointed. I want more. And Shenshan knows. And he says, Elder, what would you say? And Dongshan says, each stitch is like the earth exploding. So these are two people talking about reality in two different ways, neither of which is wrong. When Dongshan says, what is sowing? Shenshan says, it's a continuum. It's a process. It's something that's linked to what came before. And it's something that's on the way to what's coming. And so each stitch that I make exists in relationship to every other stitch. It's a making of something. Each stitch follows the other. And so for Shenshan, a stitch exists in a line of stitches. And a line of stitches exists as part of a construct of something. He's talking about a reality in which things are tied, in which there is a narrative that is constant. There's a beginning, and there's a middle, and there's an end. And then he says, what would you say? And Dongshan says, each stitch is like the earth exploding. Each stitch is its own beginning and ending of reality. He's saying moments are not just the next moment or the moment before. Moments are total. Think about this. If you're taking a walk and I ask you, what is a step? I think we understand steps to be, first of all, what follows the step before. And second, part of a movement toward something. There was a beginning. There was a place when I started walking. And now I'm on this step. And this step is just what comes in a line of lots of steps. And eventually, there might be a last step when I reach some sort of destination. And what Dongshan is saying is that the whole of reality begins anew with each step. He's saying every time you put the needle through the cloth, you change the fabric of reality as we know it. That every tiny gesture, every movement shifts the world. And when we shift the world is no longer the world it was. Now it's this one. And so by simply doing anything, by thinking anything, by moving anywhere, by taking one breath, we explode the reality that was and bring in a new reality. This one. And this is happening not just with each stitch, but with everything that happens anywhere, all the time. We're in a constant state of dying and a constant state of being born. I don't know about you, but when I imagine that walk, if I imagine that with each step the earth is exploding, it's different. If I take each step to simply be the next step, There's only so much curiosity that I bring to that step. And there's only so much curiosity that I bring to the world. It doesn't occur to me that with each step, I'm seeing something I've never seen before. I'm in some place I've never been before. I'm just moving. I'm moving through space and I'm moving through time. But when I imagine that each step is a new beginning of reality, then with each step, the world in front of me is a new world. And the person taking that step is a new person. There's so much here. Each stitch is like the world exploding. It's coincidence, but a wonderful coincidence, that we're talking about this koan on this day, when just the other day, in the mail, I received this robe. This robe belongs to a teacher named Nonin Kowani, who was the abbot of the Nebraska Zen Center. And he trained in some of the same places I trained in Japan, but before I was there. He and I corresponded, we never met. But he was a tall guy. And when he passed away maybe 5 years ago, some of his things went into boxes, which went into rooms. No one knew what to do with them. And then someone was going through and found this robe and said, "Do you want this robe?" And I thought, oh, I get to be part of the continuation of this robe. I get to put this on. So I received this thing that traveled this incredible path, right? And I see in it, and I wish I could show you better, right? It's huge because it's made for a really tall person. And that means it contains thousands and thousands of tiny, 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 tiny stitches. Each stitch, like the world exploding. Nonin sat down for days or weeks or months, holding this fabric, holding a needle, and remaking the world. And it looks like he was making this thing. But this thing is so small relative to that other act. This is like an echo of the total creation of the universe. When we can see things in this way, when we ask ourselves to see things in this way, and it is an exercise, right? It's a game we can play. We start to have a different relationship to time. We look at something like this robe as an expression of time. Not as a collection of stitches or of pieces of fabric, but as a kind of stringing together of moments. Thousands of little moments that no one saw. I picture Nonin alone in a room, happy with his needle and thread, and the whole universe bursting into flame and coming back. And all of us just going about our days, doing the same thing and not knowing. Not knowing that every single time we open our eyes, we're seeing something we haven't seen. not knowing that there is something in what looks like continuity that is more like destruction. This makes the world so big, so dynamic, so loud. Just the tiniest gesture. Boom. It's already happened so many times since we started. Each stitch is like the world exploding. Like I said at the beginning, maybe it's better not to say anything about that at all. It's perfect. So I offer that up today. Carry it around. Notice that. And that's where I'll stop.